Welcome to this week's Transport Brief. Now, as we all know, the transport sector has been one of the most visibly hit by the coronavirus outbreak. Airlines, train companies, ferry companies, car makers have all felt the pinch to varying degrees and mostly in a bad way. Demand has plummeted in things like aviation, people don't want to buy cars anymore, you think twice about taking the train because of social distancing measures. That's our life now. And governments have jumped into action to try and help those companies survive because of the way they create jobs, the way they make people move around, they spur the economy. Last week, Lufthansa got its €9 billion bailout. KLM got its €3.4 billion bailout on paper. The European Commission's competition regulator is going to have to look at that now. And there are also a slew of other bailouts for the aviation industry that have already been granted or are in the process of being granted. More than €30 billion. Train companies are thinking about applying for money. Ferry companies have been granted aid in a certain amount. Car makers have been given things like consumer subsidies for electric vehicles in order to spur demand, make people buy cars, get back to normal. But there are also non-monetary measures, because those are things like state-backed loans, direct loans, so on and so forth. But there are other things, and we'll look at three of those this week. The first one is, and it's one of the first things that the EU was actually able to do for the economy at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak in Europe, is the issue of airport slots, takeoff and landing permits basically for airports. And they're known as use it or lose it rules. Airlines sign up to them, they have to use them within a certain period, and if they don't, then they go back into a pot, and then next year they're redistributed in whatever way that they are. It's basically long-term business planning. If Lufthansa knows that it wants to operate a Frankfurt to London route, they have to use a certain amount of those slots, 80%. And because of the way that the coronavirus outbreak affected air travel at the beginning of the pandemic and continues to affect it, airlines simply weren't able to fulfill those obligations without putting empty planes in the sky. And that's where this phenomenon known as ghost flights came into operation. The European Union was rather quickly, considering the institutional cycle, able to agree that those rules should be waived until the end of October, which they are still on track to last until, because summer demand is going to be a lot lower than it would be normally. People like Eurocontrol still don't really know how it is going to evolve over the coming months. So that's what the EU was able to do for the airline industry. It wasn't an injection of money. It was basically saying that the regulations as they are no longer fit for purpose because they weren't designed to operate during these extremely unprecedented and exceptional circumstances. At the moment, there's a bit of a spat going on because, of course, takeoff and landing slots directly feed into airport operators' bottom lines. The airline industry wants to continue this quite plum period in terms of regulations in its regard, and wants the European Commission to decide by the end of July whether or not it's going to extend the airport slots waiver beyond October. The Commission has to do a report by the end of September saying whether or not air travel is going to pick up again, whether or not it recommends this waiver being extended. Airports say it's far too early to even think about that at the moment because we just don't know whether or not infections will come back, whether or not people will actually want to fly again, blah, blah, blah. So look out for that. That's going to be something that's going to continue to split airport operators and airlines for weeks now. The second thing is in the rail industry, where the European Commission proposed a few weeks ago now that member states would be able to waive certain rules regarding track access charges. Now, normally rail companies or whoever have to pay to use infrastructure. That's how it works. And these kind of things are the reason why freight sometimes struggles to get a larger share, rail freight that is, and why night trains have become slightly more unprofitable in recent years and only quite recently started to take off again. Because if you have to pay in order to use infrastructure and you can't cover that cost and make a profit through ticket sales or freight sales or whatever, you're not going to run services. You're not going to enter that market. The Commission recognizes that coronavirus is a big thing and wants people to use the railways because of various reasons, because they are more sustainable, they are a sometimes more pricing option than taking your car or clogging up the roads or whatever. So that's at the beginning of the cycle at the moment, where the member states and the European Parliament will have to agree whether or not they think that this March until December, backdated to March to December period, would be a good time to waive things like and other sort of regulatory measures to reduce, linked to how much a railway company has to pay. And it all takes regulation because it's all a single market. You have to stick to the rules, create a level playing field. So that's another one to look out for. The third thing, and it hasn't been granted yet, and maybe it won't be, is a waiver or extension to carbon dioxide emission targets. Now, this is a very key year for the car maker industry because this is when the 95 grams of CO2 per kilometre target comes really into force. The average fleet-wide emissions benchmark that all European-based manufacturers are going to have to meet is going to really bite at the end of the year. And at the moment, according to the European Environment Agency, which just published data last week, it does not look good. Car makers have been making more and more SUVs. People have been buying these larger, less efficient cars. And actually, in 2019, it was the third year of growth of carbon dioxide emissions. Now, car makers have already said back in March that they wanted the Commission to give them a little bit more time to meet this 95 grams of CO2 target. Now, environmental groups will say, well, it's not about how many cars you sell or produce, it's about how efficient they are. Car makers say that they just can't do it in the amount of time that's left because their business has been made so uncertain, like everybody else. The Commission seems to not be blinking at this stage, despite the fact that Germany was very keen to explore this option. There hasn't been much over the last weeks or even months actually on this. But with this latest set of data, preliminary data, I must say, coming out, it looks like the EU might not hit this target. Certain car makers will, certain car makers might not. Where that average comes to, we don't know yet. The EEA said that electric car sales need to go up in order to meet this target, and then to start laying the groundwork for the 2030 target to be met. Will the Commission have a little bit of leniency here? Will MEPs let them have the leniency there? Member states might be keen to explore the option. We don't know. Again, like the ghost flights, the airport slots issue, it is still too early to say what's going to happen in the next few months. Life is starting to go back to normal slightly, but is that preemptive at the moment? If I could tell you, then I would. But those are three things. Two things that are quite concrete, one that's already been done, one that's pending, one that maybe people can start thinking about. And that's it for now. Again, thank you to anyone that's kicked in any sort of money to the Euractiv crowdfunding. We really appreciate it. Again, even if it's just to see that we're doing something that you enjoy, watch on a semi-regular basis. In return, I would ask you to share this video with who you want, people you think would enjoy it. Subscribe to the Transport Brief if you haven't already. Send it to your friends, your enemies even. And I'll see you next time. Ciao. Oh, you'll notice the haircut, very professional. I'd like to claim credit for myself, but sadly, no. I don't look like I've been dragged through a hedge backwards though, so that's good. Bye.